All right. The subject today is how to win the argument with meat eaters. And I'm assuming that my audience today skews vegan. But for those who may be listening who are not vegan, please take this as an argument for why you should join our team. We'd love to have you. We need more members. Uh, there are generally three reasons why people adopt the vegan diet: for their own health, for the environment, or for the animals, to end the cruel confinement and slaughter of animals. All three arguments are equally valid and persuasive to me and probably to many of you listening. But what's the best way to convert meat eaters to veganism? Is it to try to convince them that meat eating is cruel to animals, that we have no moral right to effectively enslave and kill other sentient beings? Or is it to try to raise the alarm about how animal agriculture burns the land and creates deserts, wastes tremendous amounts of water and pollutes our waters and fouls the environment with cesspools of manure, and is responsible for most of the deforestation in the world and most of the biodiversity loss, and is the leading cause of climate change? In short, the fact that animal agriculture is an environmental nightmare. Or is it to try to convince people that they'll live longer and thrive on a vegan diet? Should we simply appeal to people's immediate self-interest? They will likely become healthier and live longer if they give up animal foods. Well, you may sense that the person you're debating is most open to the environmental argument, and so you may decide to go with that. Or maybe your meat-eating friend thinks of herself as a big animal lover. Then you may want to stress the moral argument about killing sentient beings. There's no one right answer. But I want to suggest what I believe is the strongest argument to be prepared to make with non-vegans. Be prepared for the health debate. I don't think anybody has ever argued that confining, slaughtering, and eating animals is better for the animals. That's a hard case to make. Meat defenders generally grant that advantage to the vegans. And almost all meat eaters with any degree of environmental consciousness concede that the plant-based diet is better for the environment in all kinds of ways, since it's impossible to argue that cesspools of manure, the industry calls them lagoons, it's impossible to argue that cesspools of manure improve the environment, or that gigatons of methane belched into the atmosphere improve the climate, or that chopping back the Amazon to allow for cattle grazing does the planet any good, or that the trawling of the ocean floor by industrial fishing helps the oceans. Meat eaters often know that, but it just doesn't matter enough to them. That's why I think it's most important to lead with the health argument, or at least to be prepared to make the health argument. Choosing to avoid meat and eat a plant-based diet has never seemed so virtuous and necessary. Between the intrinsic cruelty of industrial livestock production and livestock's climate footprint, estimated by the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization to be 14.5% of all greenhouse gases worldwide, significantly greater than that of plant agriculture, it has become increasingly difficult to defend the place of meat and animal-sourced foods in our diets. Who wrote these words? They were written by Gary Taubes, perhaps the leading advocate of beef eating and the keto diet. Even Gary Taubes concedes the animal cruelty argument and the environmental argument. He just believes that though it's a shame that animal agriculture destroys the environment and is cruel to animals, eating them is healthy. So if we win the health argument, the other side has nothing left, as Gary Taubes has effectively conceded. Two kinds of scales symbolize the opportunity here. The first is the balance scale, because the argument you'll hear most often from meat eaters is a balancing of goods versus harms. Almost all meat eaters concede, after all, the environmental and animal cruelty debate. So what these meat defenders do is balance the harm done to the animals and to the environment with the supposed good of meat eating to your health. You've heard people say something like, yeah, it's a shame that the animals have to die. I wish they were treated better. And I know that the methane emitted by cows is bad for the climate. But after all, animal foods are healthy and people have to get their protein and their calcium. And those harms are a shame, but they're the price we just have to pay because people's health comes first. I don't want to be weak or anemic or protein deficient. So if you could convince these people that animal foods are in fact unhealthy, that everything they believe about meat eating and health is a myth, they have no case. When the truth hits them that meat and dairy are in fact making us sick and killing us, and that we'd have far more food if we didn't feed our food, grains, to animals, that balance scale becomes pointless because all the weight is on one side of the scale. And then there's that other scale, the scale that you weigh yourself on. This scale is even more important to most Americans because along with Mexico, which now eats a diet resembling ours, we are the fattest nation on earth. North America is the fattest continent on earth. 42% of Americans are obese. 74% of Americans are considered either overweight or obese. And you'll encounter a lot of meat eaters who actually believe that eating meat helps keep their weight down because they believe that carbs make you fat. So with regard to both scales, if you win the health argument, you win the debate. Even if you can just convince people that they'll lose weight on a plant-based diet, they may not care about the animals or the planet or even other health concerns. They just want to get in shape. That's 74% of Americans who have that concern as a top priority. So winning the health argument is crucial, and particularly understanding how diet affects your weight. The knock on the vegan diet is that it makes you weak, presumably the same way it makes elephants and bulls and rhinos and gorillas weak. The documentary Game Changers about vegan bodybuilders helps some, but the myth persists. You've got to be able to counter the myths. And what makes the myths sound impressive is when scientific studies are cited to defend them. When people try to make the case for eating meat and dairy, they often say that they read this study or that study that said that meat eating is healthy or at least not too unhealthy, or they read an article that vegans have weak bones or smaller brains or their teeth fall out. The internet is full of disinformation. You can find articles to support the thesis that the world is flat. The truth is that the overwhelming evidence in scientific studies supports a plant-based diet. Study after study shows that the plant-based diet leads to healthier blood pressure and lower risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer than a diet high in animal foods. Study after study shows that the plant-based diet leads to a healthier weight than a diet high in animal foods. You can browse nutritionfacts.org to find countless videos about studies that support the vegan diet. But if you look hard enough, you can also find studies that cast shade on the vegan diet. Just Google, "Is a vegan diet healthy? Studies," and you'll find a world of articles and links to studies detailing the health advantages of a vegan diet, and you'll also find some articles and studies that claim that a vegan diet is risky. It took me just a minute to find a study that claimed, quote, "Vegans have a greater prevalence of mental health problems, which may lead to a poorer quality of life. An optimal diet should be balanced, consisting of lean meat, nuts, fresh fruits and vegetables, and olive oil. A wholesome diet is essential in maintaining a healthy gut flora, which in turn is pivotal in avoiding inflammatory disorders." Now, if you're a committed longtime vegan, you read attacks like this associating veganism with mental health problems, you tend to roll your eyes and wonder where the heck they came up with this nonsense. What's the basis for this extraordinary accusation? But if you're not already a vegan, or maybe you're considering becoming a vegan, it sounds alarming. Vegans have a greater prevalence of mental health problems? That doesn't sound good. Maybe the vegan diet is too extreme if it leads to mental health problems. Let's come back to this quote, casting shade on veganism later, and see if it's true and just how worrisome it should be. Let's agree on one thing, that you could find a nutritional study to support almost any proposition. Why is it that you could find a study to support almost any proposition? Because research scientists do so many bad studies. There's a lot of money in research, and studies are done that are designed to create confusion. Maybe there's an incentive for research scientists to create confusion because that enables them to get more grants to do more studies. There are no studies, after all, as far as I know, on the motivations of nutritional research scientists when they design studies, but I'd love to see that study. Anyway, here's the problem. Let's say you want to do a study on whether or not a vegan diet is healthy. You can contrast one group eating vegan with one group of people eating meat, right? Now, it's sometimes said that the ideal research study is a double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized study. That's how drug studies are often done. So if you can do that, you'd have a highly regarded scientific study. What does it mean to be a double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized study? Double-blind means that neither the patients nor the researchers, doctors, know which study group the patients are in. So if you're testing a new drug, neither you nor your doctor knows if you're getting the new drug or a placebo. How do you do that with food? Put on a blindfold every time you eat? Somehow try not to taste the food so you don't know what you're eating? Obviously, you can't do a double-blind study of diet. Can you use a placebo? Half the people eat a thing that looks like meat, but it's really a sugar placebo? No, there are no food placebos. Can you do a randomized study? Well, a randomized study randomly assigns participants to either an experimental group or a control group. There's a popular Netflix film now called You Are What You Eat, a twin experiment in which they randomly assign people to eat either the meat diet or the vegan diet. And some people who wanted to be on the vegan diet wound up on the meat diet. And some people who wanted to be on the meat diet got assigned the vegan diet. What did they gain through the randomization? They could say it was more scientific to be randomized, but they just wound up with participants who were more likely to cheat on their diet. They even filmed a woman who was supposed to be on the vegan diet, but she didn't want to be, and she started eating chicken. All these study design metrics, randomized, placebo-controlled, double-blind, may be the best way to do drug studies, but they're completely irrelevant to nutritional studies. And so most nutritional studies are what we call self-reporting. In self-reporting studies, people go home, eat whatever they want to eat, and once a week or so try to remember what they ate, or fill out a food diary, or fill out a questionnaire. Proving my point that researchers like to create work for themselves, there was actually a study done of self-reporting studies. And it found, quote, a strong and consistent systemic underreporting of energy intake across adults and children in studies. Underreporting of energy intake has been found to increase with body mass index, and the differences between macronutrient reports indicate that not all foods are underreported equally. So people either don't remember everything they ate, or they underreport when they binge on ice cream and cookies. Self-reporting studies are, for the most part, highly dubious, and that's most nutritional studies that you come across. If you do a study of meat eaters versus vegans, you run into these complicating factors. First, are the self-reported vegans on a healthy, whole foods, low-fat vegan diet, or are they eating French fries and drinking Coke? Did the self-reported vegans become vegan at age 65 after being diagnosed with heart disease? Are some of the meat eaters eating more fruits and vegetables than the vegans? And then there are lifestyle factors like exercise, smoking, drinking, sleep, and drug use that also affect health. Again, even though most studies show health advantages to the vegan diet, it's probably not worth your time to debate studies. Chances are that you're not a nutritional research scientist, and neither is the person you're debating. And since many nutritional studies are self-reporting studies that are badly designed and all but worthless, a debate between two people who are not familiar with the drawbacks of the dubious studies they're citing is a debate worth nobody's time. Instead of arguing over studies, let's use logic to analyze diet. If someone's going to claim that there's some benefit to eating animal foods, they have to identify where that benefit lies. If you're debating with a meat advocate, challenge them to identify the benefit. That's not too much to ask. This is a list of the 5 macronutrients: carbohydrate, protein, fat, water, and fiber. But I'm going to complicate things because I've discovered the 6th macronutrient, which we'll return to at the end of this presentation. The 6th macronutrient is not yet accepted by established science, but I'll make the case for it later. For now, let's limit ourselves to an analysis of the 5 macronutrients. Sometimes you'll find water and fiber excluded from this list. Sometimes we're told there are 3 macronutrients, but you need all 5 of these to live. So let's define all 5 as macronutrients. If someone's going to claim a health advantage to animal foods, it's got to reside in at least one of these 5 macronutrients, right? Where else could it be? So let's take them one by one, starting with water. Severe dehydration can lead to seizures, kidney failure, coma, death. Chronic dehydration could lead to kidney stones, reduced kidney function, urinary tract infections, constipation, poor sleep, muscle damage, muscle spasms. Dehydration must be avoided at all costs. That reminds me. It's extremely important. This is not controversial. Nobody advocates dehydration. Do you drink 8 glasses of water per day? Most of us don't. That's what's commonly recommended to prevent dehydration. But you'd have to do something like have a glass of water at 8 a.m., 10 a.m., noon, 2 p.m., 4 p.m., 6 p.m., 8 p.m., and 10 p.m. That's 8 glasses of water. How many people do anything like that? I never did. I don't think I know anybody who drinks a glass of water every 2 hours like clockwork from the time they get up to the time they go to sleep. In the lay press, you'll often read that 75% of Americans are dehydrated. There's actually no study that supports that number. Still, it's a safe bet that a significant percentage of Americans don't take in enough water. But you don't have to get your water from a glass. You can and should obtain much of your water from food. What's more full of water, plant foods or animal foods? Answer: plant foods. Apples are 86% water by weight, cantaloupes are 89%, strawberries 92%, broccoli 92%. Zucchini and tomatoes are each 94%, celery 95%, cucumbers and romaine lettuce are 96% water. Almost all fruits and vegetables are almost all water by weight. And it's the best, healthiest water on the planet. It's plant-filtered water. The cooking of whole grains is another ideal source of water. How do you make oatmeal? You boil oats, rice, buckwheat, millet, barley, quinoa. These are all cooked in water, and the grains absorb the water that's been purified to a large extent by boiling. Even legumes, beans and lentils, absorb the cooking water. But people don't generally boil bacon or chicken or burgers. So you have the filtered water that's naturally in plants, and you also gain water from cooking grains and legumes. I might have a big bowl of oatmeal in the morning, serve it over some mixed greens, top it with berries and grapes, and I'm probably getting as much water from the cooked oats, from the greens, from the fruit, as if I drank 3 or 4 glasses. But is there any water in meat? Yes, there's some water in meat. Meat has to be cooked, of course, and the higher the cooking temperature, the more water will be lost. Cooked meat, beef or chicken, for example, will generally be about 50 to 60% water. Some of that often comes from what's called the flavor solutions of water, salt, and sodium phosphate injected into the meat by supermarkets to freshen up the taste of foul, decaying carcasses. Some of the water content is also what's called retained water. It's the water used to wash the feces off the carcasses in the slaughterhouse. So you've got your choice of eating plant foods that are rich with naturally filtered water, or eating animal foods and getting a little bit of slaughterhouse water and liquid flavoring from supermarkets. Clearly, advantage plants. There's probably been no avenue of nutritional science that has advanced more in the last 40 years than the study of fiber. We know that it healthfully slows down digestion, normalizes blood sugar levels, carries cholesterol out of the blood, out of the body, promotes healthy colonies of bacteria in the gut, lowers the risk of heart disease, diabetes, diverticular disease, colon cancer, and constipation, and has countless other beneficial effects, including fighting depression. And of course, fiber is only in plant foods. There's absolutely no fiber in any animal foods unless you get lucky and eat a fish that swallowed part of a fishing net. One reason you need fiber is for the metabolites they produce. Metabolites are substances produced during metabolism, the reactions in our cells that change food into energy. And it just so happens that dietary fiber is crucial to creating metabolites that improve our health and even metabolites that can improve our mood. As explained in the book Fiber Fueled by Dr. Will Bolshevitz, plants protect and nourish us in large part because of fiber. Sulforaphane from cruciferous vegetables, for example, increases healthy gut microbes like butyrates and repairs the intestinal lining to reverse leaky gut. But it just so happens that metabolites from meat consumption are dangerous. In the words of Dr. B, when people ingest L-carnitine, which is abundant in red meat, the gut bacteria produce TMAO. Increased TMAO means increased risk of heart disease, stroke, Alzheimer's, type 2 diabetes, chronic kidney disease, peripheral artery disease, congestive heart failure, and atrial fibrillation. To sum it up, fiber is what your body craves to create health-promoting metabolites. Animal foods have no fiber, and it just so happens that they create toxic metabolites. The macronutrient score is now plants 2, animals 0. If there's any advantage to be found in animal foods, it's clearly got nothing to do with water or fiber. So it's time to move on to the third macronutrient, carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is the most misunderstood macronutrient. We need to understand it better. Let's start with the question, are potatoes carbs? No. Potatoes are not carbs. Potatoes are a root vegetable, like beets and sweet potatoes. 90% of the calories in a sweet potato come from carbohydrate. 9% from protein, 1% from fat. 86% of the calories in a carrot come from carbohydrate. 9% from protein, 5% from fat. 83% of the calories in beets come from carbohydrate. 13% from protein, 4% from fat. And the russet potato, 88% come from carbohydrate, 11% from protein, 1% from fat. So you can see that the potato is in line with other root vegetables in having most of its calories from carbohydrate, while still offering a significant amount of protein and a smidgen of fat. If you try to reduce a potato to a carb, you're ignoring its significant protein content, ignoring its slight amount of fat, ignoring its substantial content of water, which is about 75 to 80% of the potato by weight, and ignoring its fiber. It contains all 5 macronutrients, after all, as all human food does. And don't ignore the vitamins and minerals it contains. Vitamin B1, B2, B3, B6, vitamin C, calcium, iron, magnesium, phosphorus, and potassium. So it's not a carb, it's a whole food. We have to stop calling potatoes carbs. This is a destructive myth. The only foods that should be identified with single macronutrients are the ones I've listed in this slide. All oils and butter are 100% fat, so it's accurate to refer to them as fat. Sugar in all its forms, white sugar, brown sugar, agave nectar, coconut sugar, it's all sugar, it's all carbohydrate. Egg whites are pretty close to being a pure protein. But potatoes are not a carb. Here's why the potato is a great weight loss food. Even though potatoes are very filling, there's actually less than 1 calorie per gram of potato. Now, how can that be? People call potatoes carbs, right? And we know that there are 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate. So how can there be less than 1 calorie per gram of potato if it's a carbohydrate? Shouldn't potatoes be 4 calories per gram? Answer: potatoes are not a carbohydrate. As I said, they're a root vegetable, and by weight, they're mostly fiber and water. So you're filling yourself up on a vegetable that's got a lot of 0-calorie content, a lot of fiber and water, leaving the potato with 1 calorie per gram. How about bread? Is bread a carb? No. Ezekiel sprouted grain bread made with sprouted wheat, filtered water, sprouted barley, sprouted millet, sprouted lentils, sprouted soybeans, sprouted spelt, yeast, gluten, and sesame seeds is 80 calories per slice and is 25% protein with 1 gram of fat. It's about 70% carbohydrate. So it's not a carb, it's a processed food. But as breads go, it's a pretty healthy one with a range of nutrients. Other breads may not be that healthy, but no bread is a pure carb. How about tortillas? Are they carbs? I have a package of corn tortillas. It's got 60 calories, about 4 of which come from protein and 3 from fat. And this is clearly protein and fat that derives from the corn, so the tortilla is not a carb. Is pasta a carb? I've got some red lentil penne made from red lentil flour and brown rice flour in a 3.5-ounce serving. It's got 22 grams of protein and 2 grams of fat. It's extremely high in protein. It's not a carb. How about regular old semolina wheat pasta? I've got a package of 100% semolina spaghetti that says that a 2-ounce serving has 6 grams of protein. And I don't know about you, but when I eat spaghetti, I eat more than 2 ounces. So there's plenty of protein in pasta. It's not a carb. Again, pasta is a processed food, not as healthy as a sweet potato, but it's not a carb. Only sugar in its many forms is a carb. Are donuts carbs? Donuts have plenty of sugar. Are they carbs? No. Donuts have oil and they may have dairy or eggs. Donuts are going to be very high in fat as well as sugar. Donuts are unhealthy for more reasons than I can count, but they shouldn't be called carbs and thereby slander carbohydrate, the natural fuel for the human body, and the sacred joining of carbon and water that makes life possible. If you're going to claim that there's anything wrong with carbohydrate, you have to claim that there's something wrong with all vegetables and all fruits. We know that these are the healthiest foods on the planet, rich in fiber and antioxidants and vitamins and minerals. People never say that they're on a diet, so they have to avoid broccoli. But they do say that they're avoiding carbs because they're trying to lose weight. But most of the calories in broccoli come from carbohydrate, although there's also a good amount of protein and a little bit of fat. So why do people associate carbohydrate with being fattening? For one thing, because sugar, which is truly carbohydrate, 100% carbohydrate, is terribly fattening. There are 1,775 calories in a pound of sugar, which is truly a carb. There are 350 to 400 calories in a pound of potatoes, which of course is a root vegetable. So yes, carbs are fattening if you're eating a pure carb, sugar or maple syrup, but don't mislabel potatoes as carbs and then claim they're fattening. The magician Penn Jillette lost over 100 pounds eating a diet of nothing but potatoes. Carbohydrate within whole foods is a good thing. It's a necessary thing. You can't live without it. Plants are what provide you with carbohydrates. Just as there's no fiber in meat, there's no carbohydrate in meat. So once again, we have a no-brainer macronutrient category. When it comes to carbohydrate, which is indispensable to life, plants provide it and flesh foods simply do not. So clearly plants are superior to animal foods when it comes to macronutrient number 3, carbohydrate. That brings us to fat. We're up to macronutrient number 4. The advocates of the paleo diet and the keto diet want to try to convince you that fat doesn't make you fat. Okay, what does? Broccoli, cauliflower, brown rice, apples, tea? The argument is so preposterous that it's hard to take seriously. In your own experience, have you ever known anyone to get fat on broccoli? Look, we know what contributes to obesity. Highly caloric foods, including some vegan ones. Alcohol, all forms of isolated sugars and oils, which are 100% fat, and flesh foods, which are usually in the range of 50% fat, and dairy foods, which are extremely high in fat. When you eat a whole foods vegan diet, and if you eliminate or absolutely minimize sugar, oil, and alcohol, it's all but impossible to get fat. Now, you need some fat in your diet. It's one of the macronutrients after all. So what's the problem with eating too much fat? To start off with, it's got 9 calories per gram instead of 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate. So over time, if you're eating a diet that's got 35 or 40% of your calories coming from fat, of course you'll gain weight compared to a diet that's, say, 10% calories as fat. Just in my lifetime, the average middle-aged woman or man in the US is about 25 to 30 pounds heavier than they were when I was a boy. Since 1960, the prevalence of adult obesity in the United States has more than tripled, from 13% in 1960 to 42% today. Since 1970, the prevalence of obesity has more than tripled among children, from 5% in the early 70s to 17% today. I like to note that since Obamacare went into effect in 2013, giving upwards of 20 million Americans more access to medical care, obesity in America has increased from 36% to 42%. So going to the doctor clearly isn't a very effective way of combating obesity. Now, nobody should be fat shamed or skinny shamed. We're not trying to hurt anyone's feelings here, and we're trying to stay on point in a debate about health. But we can't pretend when we discuss health and nutrition that obesity is anything other than a disease state. Being obese is statistically associated with greater all-cause mortality, heart disease, hypertension, cancer, type 2 diabetes, stroke, high cholesterol, fatty liver disease, gout, kidney disease, fertility problems, respiratory problems, arthritis, and more. And when you have what's called metabolic syndrome, this group of conditions that are linked, obesity, heart disease, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, each condition contributes to the other. Is it the obesity that causes the hypertension that causes the heart disease? Well, about 75% of people who have hypertension are obese. Why are all these diseases linked? Because it's the cheeseburger and the pork that causes the obesity and causes the heart disease and the high cholesterol and type 2 diabetes and the high blood pressure. These diseases are all linked because they have the same cause, which is the fatty, animal-based Western diet. Now, it's not only animal foods that make the Western diet fatty. Oil is also a factor, but all those fatty foods can result in high cholesterol teaming up with saturated fat to create atherosclerotic plaques that attack the arteries and ultimately the heart. Question: of all the mammals, how many develop atherosclerosis? Let me give you now the complete list of all mammals that struggle with atherosclerosis. Here's the complete list. Just like we're the only species to take selfies, it just so happens that we're the only species to get atherosclerosis. Now, we should have been able to deduce that we're herbivores since the year 1913, when a Russian fellow named Nikolai Nikolaevich Anichkov, working at a lab in St. Petersburg, fed cholesterol from egg yolks to some poor unsuspecting rabbits, and thereby brought on atherosclerotic plaque and lesions. And as was thereafter established, it just so happens that when you feed cholesterol to omnivores and carnivores, such as dogs and cats, atherosclerosis never develops. Atherosclerosis, therefore, is a disease that develops only in herbivores. And it develops, of course, in humans. It brings on heart disease. Therefore, humans are herbivores. We're the only animal to develop atherosclerosis because all the other herbivores don't eat meat. You'll never find a rabbit eating a hamburger. And all the omnivores and carnivores are biologically protected against developing the disease. Atherosclerosis only affects meat-eating herbivores, and we are the only species stupid enough to qualify. Getting back to fat. Americans are way too fat, and animal foods are, of course, extremely fatty, often with 50% or more of their calories coming from fat. And we know that the saturated fat and trans fats in meat and dairy are particularly dangerous. You would think that we've arrived at a no-brainer, as the obvious lesson becomes eating animals damages our bodies because, among other factors, they're simply too fatty. But Americans can't give up on eating animals, certainly not just because the science tells them to do so. So along comes the keto diet, to try to convince you that eating the bulk of your calories from fat is a good thing. You may ask, how could it possibly be good for Americans to eat more fat if they're already eating tons of fat and they're extremely fat and sick? That should be a rhetorical question. And yet the keto geniuses have come up with an answer, and I swear I'm not making this up. They claim that eating a lot of fat is good for you because as long as you can manage to eat fat and almost nothing but fat all day long, it leads to the state of ketosis, which they admit gives you bad breath and constipation and dehydration and fatigue and brain fog and increases your risk of developing kidney stones and gout and osteoporosis. And still, amazingly enough, it's highly desirable to achieve that wonderful state of ketosis in which fat rather than carbohydrate becomes your fuel because, wait for it, there are people who claim they've lost weight that way. That's it. That's the reason for this obscenely unnatural diet in which you have to be scared of apples. Unfortunately, a good deal of the weight those keto dieters lost may have been water weight, since a high protein, high fat diet is going to stress your kidneys as they struggle to expel all that unwelcome protein and acid load. In order to attain the glorious state of ketosis, you need to consume something like 80% of your calories as fat. 80%. Roast beef is not nearly sufficient. It's way too lean. In order to reach 80% of your calories as fat, you'll need to put a stick of butter on your roast beef and wash it down with some oil. See this picture of a fatty cut of meat? To make this meal fatty enough for the keto diet, at very least, you'd have to get rid of the broccoli and the potatoes, and you might have to add some cheese. People actually strive to attain this glorious, unnatural state of ketosis, in spite of the bad breath and constipation and dehydration and brain fog and kidney stones and passing out, because they believe it'll make them nice and trim, really. I'm sure that some people have lost weight on a keto diet somehow. But what is the logic of saying that you should risk all kinds of known health risks in order to allegedly lose weight, when you can clearly lose weight on a healthy whole foods diet of plants and only plants? If you want to add more fat to your diet, if you're trying to gain weight, for example, or if you feel better when you eat a little more fat, there are healthy plant options, nuts and seeds, avocados, olives. There's no problem obtaining fat on a plant-based diet. The healthiest fats you can find are in flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, avocados, and walnuts, plant foods that are all high in omega-3 fatty acids. The proportion of fat is excessive and dangerous in animal foods, while most plant foods are low fat. And the plant foods that are rich in fat, nuts, seeds, avocado, have much healthier fat profiles than animal foods. Given that the fat in meat, eggs, and dairy is excessive and has the slight drawback that it can make you fat and sick and diabetic and can kill you, whereas most plants are healthfully low in fat, we can conclude that fat is a slam dunk. You're far better off getting your fat in the right amount from plants. The score is now plants 4, animals 0. So where can the advantage possibly be in animal foods? There's only one macronutrient left, and there'd better be a significant advantage to animal foods in that category to compensate for losing badly in the first 4 categories. You know what the waiters ask. What's your choice of protein? Chicken, pork, beef, or fish? Well, this begs the question, is meat a protein? No, meat is not a protein. That's PR propaganda. If you're arguing with a meat eater, don't let them call meat protein. They've been conned. Don't let them con you. Meat is roughly half protein and half fat, so we could just as well call it a fat. You don't get to pick your favorite macronutrient and label a food accordingly. Ben & Jerry's chocolate chip cookie dough vanilla ice cream has 5 grams of protein in a serving. Maybe we should label that a protein too. Meat is not a protein. Meat is muscle tissue from a dead animal, full of fat and cholesterol and toxins and endotoxins, as well as protein. In what the New York Times called, quote, the most comprehensive large study ever undertaken of the relationship between diet and the risk of developing disease, popularly known as the China study, Dr. T. Colin Campbell demonstrated that animal protein is carcinogenic. It's high in the amino acid methionine, which is implicated in the growth of cancers. Methionine restriction, which implicitly means animal food restriction, has proven to be a useful cancer-fighting strategy. Dr. Campbell's work proved that it just so happens that while animal protein brought on cancer, plant protein did not. Therefore, there should really be no dispute that plant protein is superior to animal protein. It's also superior because it's not excessive. Excessive protein does the human body no good because the body cannot store protein. You simply excrete it. And an overload of protein causes an acid load that stresses the kidneys. To make the case that you need animal protein to live or to thrive, you have to argue that you can't build muscle well on a vegan diet and that vegans must be falling down all over the place. But that's just not true. This is an image of the vegan bodybuilder Robert Cheek. Quarterbacks like Tom Brady and Cam Newton and many other football players played as vegans. Novak Djokovic is vegan. Venus and Serena Williams are plant-based. Many sprinters and ultra-endurance athletes are vegan. So there's no advantage to animal protein, just the disadvantages of animal protein being excessive and carcinogenic. Conclusion: there is no macronutrient for which you could find an advantage in eating animal foods. The final score of the 5 known and established macronutrients is 5-0 in favor of plants. There is no macronutrient in which you could find an advantage to eating animal flesh or dairy. Now, you could imagine the embattled defender of the paleo or keto diet conceding now, okay, sure, I'll admit the whole foods vegan diet is superior for the 5 macronutrients, but what about the micronutrients? Vitamins, minerals, antioxidants? Beef is full of vitamins and minerals. Well, where does a cow get its vitamins and minerals? From eating plants. There isn't a single vitamin or mineral that we need to cycle through an animal in order to obtain it. We could obtain it the way the animal does, from eating plants. And antioxidants are hugely important. They prevent oxidative stress to brain cells, to heart cells, to your eyes, to your organs. They reduce inflammation. They can prevent cancer. And they're essentially only in plant foods. You don't eat sausage to gain antioxidants. You eat berries and grapes and celery and beets, all kinds of fruits and vegetables. Toxins accumulate in the food chain and get stored in the liver and in the fatty tissues of animals. The grain that we feed to animals is almost never grown organically. It's heavily sprayed. The bigger fish that eat the smaller fish will be more likely to have higher levels of toxins. Plants filter out toxins. Organically grown plants are your best bet to eat clean food without toxins. Now, how about the endotoxins? All food animals, whether they're from concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs, or are grass-fed, organically ranged, free-range, regeneratively ranged, and in America, it's about 99% CAFOs, but all of them are killed in the same slaughterhouses. So when you hear a defensive meat eater say, I only eat organically grown grass-fed meat, well, it's killed in the same slaughterhouse as the conventionally raised cows. And when you cut open a dead animal, the guts pour out. Even the happy, organic, grass-fed, free-range, regenerative guts. So every surface in a slaughterhouse is contaminated with E. coli, Salmonella, Campylobacter, and all kinds of harmful bacteria. In the meat cases in your local grocery store, the cuts of meat are exposed to ultraviolet light to kill the bacteria and parasites. They don't have to do that with blueberries, naturally, because blueberries aren't filthy with harmful organisms, but they have to do it with sirloin steak. So hopefully it works and kills the bacteria, and certainly cooking will kill the bacteria, but these toxins turn into endotoxins. Endotoxins are the main component of the outer membrane of the cell wall of gram-negative bacteria. Endotoxins are heat stable. You can't cook them out. And an article on endotoxemia in human septic shock concluded, endotoxemia occurs frequently in septic shock and is associated with severe manifestations of this syndrome, including cardiac depression and multiple organ failure. In other words, endotoxemia is dangerous. Endotoxin is also released when bacteria are killed by antibiotics. So a patient comes into the ER with a terrible infection, is given antibiotics. The antibiotics kill the bacteria, but that may result in endotoxemia, the presence of endotoxins in the bloodstream. Well, when people eat meat, they may kill the bacteria with cooking, but they're giving themselves a dose of endotoxins 3 times a day. Why would anyone want to do that? To give themselves the same health risk on a daily basis that would result from treatment for a terrible infection? As this study explained, endotoxins circulate in the blood at low concentrations in all healthy individuals. But will the foods we eat affect the concentration of endotoxins in the blood? Absolutely. This study measured the endotoxin concentration in the bloodstream of participants after meals that were fatty and less fatty. It found that it just so happens that diets with large amounts of saturated fat, animal products, and refined carbohydrate may induce endotoxemia more markedly than diets containing fiber-rich plant food. I mentioned earlier that there's arguably a sixth macronutrient. The macronutrients are what you need to absorb in order to live, and you can't live without optimism. So optimism was discovered to be the sixth macronutrient according to, let me see, it's in my notes. See. Oh yeah, uh, it wasn't a study in the New England Journal of Medicine. It was according to me. And so you have to ask yourself, do you feel more optimism when you look at fruit trees or at a confined animal feeding operation? What leads to more hope? The smell of fresh bread or the smell of a pig waste lagoon? What makes you feel more joy in being alive? A farmer's market full of fruits and vegetables or a view of dead chickens on a motorcycle? Forests or barren land burnt by cow grazing? If you go to my YouTube channel, you'll find an interview I did with Dr. Silas Rao, whom I call the avatar of optimism. I hope you'll take a few minutes to watch that, because what we're trying to do here, the seemingly impossible goal of transforming the world to be vegan, to be a vegan, nonviolent place, is an optimistic undertaking. And so it's a healthy undertaking. The healthiest activity you can engage in is in trying to create a more vegan world. It may seem hopeless sometimes to convince others to go vegan, but it takes hope to try, so it's a healthy thing for you to do. Okay, remember this study that I said I'd come back to? Vegans have a greater prevalence of mental health problems. Well, believe it or not, there have been at least 23 studies on the relationship of the vegetarian or vegan diet to depression. And they all tend to contradict each other, with many finding no relationship between a vegetarian or vegan diet and depression, and some finding increased depression among vegetarians and vegans, and some finding increased depression among meat eaters, and a beneficial effect on mood to the vegetarian or vegan diet. I know this because naturally a study was done of the studies. Let me repeat that because I didn't misspeak. A study was done of the studies of the rate of depression among vegetarians and vegans. It's called a meta-study, a study of studies. These people are fabulous at creating work for themselves. And what the study of studies concluded, unsurprisingly, is that there is a need for more good studies, since 3 of the 4 studies that were considered the highest quality studies showed that vegetarian diets are associated with a lower risk of depression. Clearly, more research is necessary on this very pressing issue, or we may need a study of the meta-studies, or else I may just fall into a depression. So, where did that nonsense come from about vegans and depression? It essentially came out of thin air. Let's return to that alarming study. Let's analyze this language now. Vegans have a greater prevalence of mental health problems. Well, no, as the meta-study concluded, there's no real evidence that vegans have a greater prevalence of mental health problems, and the studies that were considered the best indicated the opposite. An optimal diet should be balanced. What does that mean? Everybody seems to be in favor of a balanced diet, just like everybody's in favor of a healthy diet. But what does it mean? Balanced how? Balance between healthy foods and unhealthy foods? Balance between anti-cancer foods full of antioxidants and carcinogenic foods? Or maybe balance between whole, unprocessed foods and processed foods? Half unprocessed, half processed? Would that be a good balance? Half organic, half full of pesticides? What exactly is the goal here of balance? What does it mean? It's nonsense. Consisting of lean meat. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as lean meat. It's like clean coal. It's a marketing concept that doesn't exist. What's one of the problems with meat? It's fatty, and that fat clogs your arteries. What's the solution? Hire a PR team to advise you to tell people to eat lean meat. How many people go to the grocery store with a microscope to determine how much fat is in the tissue of the steak they're buying? The fat is in the tissue. You can't analyze it. You can't estimate it. You can't separate it out. Meat is fatty, period. Meat eaters always say, if you notice this, they always say that they eat lean meat. So then who the hell is eating the fatty meat? Answer, all meat eaters eat fatty meat. The next thing this advises is nuts. Well, there are studies that claim that nuts are healthy. Many of those studies are funded by the nut industry. But I'm willing to accept that nuts are healthy if you don't eat too many of them. But nuts are very fatty. So if you eat lean meat, which is fatty, and then you eat nuts, you're adding fat to a fatty diet. Okay, the next things are fresh fruits and vegetables. That's good. That's terrific. But then they go to olive oil, which is 100% fat, adding to the fat and the lean meat and the nuts, giving you exactly the kind of diet that creates obesity, which is an excellent way to get inflammatory disorders. So the diet they call a wholesome diet and an optimal diet is in fact a fatty diet that likely will make you sick and kill you. So now you've explained to your meat-eating friend why meat is unhealthy. And even if you convince them on the merits of the arguments, you find that most are reluctant to embrace health and quit consuming animals. These are some of the excuses that come up often, and you have to be prepared to answer them. So let's take them one by one. People have always eaten meat. You hear this one a lot. People have always eaten meat. The cavemen ate meat. Even assuming it's true, so what? We're trying to live to 100 in good health. The cavemen were trying to survive long enough to procreate at a time when getting enough food was a challenge, and you could be killed by a scratch leading to infection. Human sacrifice was also practiced back in the good old days. Do we want to bring that back too? Why should it be our goal to restore and perpetuate our primeval stupidities? Humans are omnivores. This statement raises a deep philosophical question. If you feed a rabbit bacon, does the rabbit become an omnivore too? It's true that most humans alive today make the mistake of living as omnivores, but in fact, we're natural herbivores, just like rabbits. I explained earlier how you can determine that just from the fact that we get atherosclerosis. Beyond that, when you compare and contrast mammalian carnivores, omnivores, and herbivores, looking at things like the gape of the mouth, the dentition, the presence or absence of starch-digesting enzymes in the saliva, the length of the intestines, the acidity of the stomach, the chewing or simply swallowing of food, in every respect, humans line up with the herbivores. Not surprisingly, humans often choke on meat. We cannot eat rotting tissue the way carnivores can. We have hands for gathering plants and playing the piano. Carnivores have claws for grasping prey. Carnivores often eat just once per week when they make a kill. We humans need to eat more often than that, unless we're visiting the True North Health Center for a detox. We have canine teeth. This argument is so foolish that I'll let the images speak for themselves. Our canine teeth are no more intimidating than our molars. We can call our hands claws too, but they're not. This is just a linguistic fallacy. Sorry, I just like the taste of meat. Well, sorry, I'm not impressed and I don't care. First of all, tastes change and adapt. I loved going to McDonald's as a kid. I'd throw up if I ate that food now. Have your tastes never changed in anything? Music, books, entertainment? It'll probably take you a matter of about 2 or 3 weeks if you change your diet to start enjoying your new food and finding your old food unpleasantly greasy and salty and overly sweet. Secondly, do you really honestly like the taste of the hamburger? Or is it the bun, the ketchup, the mustard, the onion, the lettuce and tomato, everything put in the sandwich to disguise the taste of the meat? Because if you ate the meat without those plant-based condiments, you'd probably spit it out. Would you really not like your burger if you replace the meat with a portobello mushroom? I bet you'd like it better. You're just a creature of habit. It's a profound failure of imagination to think that your taste can never change. Anyway, are you really willing to get fat and sick and die young and not be able to be there for your loved ones while helping to destroy the planet in the process because that fried chicken is so yummy? The taste argument is just a remarkably shallow argument. Are you really going to argue that you know meat is unhealthy and may make you sick and shorten your life, and you know it's cruel to the animals and terrible for the planet, and you're sorry if you die and abandon your loved ones too soon, but you just enjoy the taste so much? Come on. Surely you're a better person than that. Eating animals is just part of the circle of life. Now, that's completely false. We confine and kill the animals. We eat them. We get heart disease and cancer. We die, and then we're confined to a grave. So it's actually part of the circle of death. If you think it's part of the circle of life, you're off by 180 degrees. Again, this is a way of trying to present as unnatural something, this is a way of trying to present as natural something that's profoundly unnatural. We're chopping back the Amazon to try to accommodate our insatiable desire for beef. How is it part of the natural circle of life to destroy a rainforest? Once you understand that humans are natural herbivores, that we thrive on a plant-based diet, it's impossible to make the case that there's something normal and natural about killing animals so that we can eat them. It's no more normal and natural for humans to kill cows and eat them than it would be for cows to kill humans and eat us. Both species are natural herbivores. I eat only organically raised, grass-fed, regenerative meat grown on farms run by loving stewards of the land who cherish their cattle. Now, nobody ever defends CAFOs. Everyone seems to hate them. Everyone seems to agree that they're environmental nightmares and they're cruel to the confined animals. But some will say that they eat only organic, free-range, grass-fed meat. That's a dubious rationale, and I doubt if anybody really adheres to it. Ask these same people if they refuse to eat meat in restaurants or to eat pepperoni pizza unless the restaurants and pizza places can prove that they source only organic grass-fed meat. And even the grass-fed cows are being sent to the same slaughterhouses as the CAFO bovines. So I guess those slaughterhouses have to be very careful not to mix up the confined slaughtered cows from the free-range slaughtered cows. It's going to be hard to tell the difference once the guts are spilling out. And I doubt if the workers in the slaughterhouse, who are often undocumented children, by the way, this is an industry that employs and exploits migrant children to do dangerous work and then pays fines as a predictable and budgeted part of the cost of doing business. I doubt if the poor children from Central America working in the slaughterhouses care about which meat was grass-fed. Also, believe it or not, grass-fed meat is even worse for the environment than CAFO meat because the cows take longer to reach their finishing weight if they're grass-fed. So they belch more methane. And when they graze, they burn the land and create deserts. Forests are chopped down to create grazing land. Forests aren't chopped down to build CAFOs. So we lose more trees and more forests and more good soil because of grass-fed meat than CAFO meat. About 1% of the meat consumed in the US is grass-fed. And if all the meat that Americans ate was grass-fed or regenerative meat, we'd need about 6 planet Earths to accommodate the demand. So this is a very elitist way to eat. There's no way everyone can do it while eating the kind of diet that Americans eat now. Just as the protein health argument is bullshit, so the cow manure environmental argument is anemic. Even Al Gore seems to want to make the case for regeneratively raised meat as somehow nurturing to the land. Would-be environmentalists bend over backwards and twist themselves into knots to try to construct some rationale to keep animal agriculture going. And the latest is magical cow manure. The premise is that the magical cow manure in regenerative farming helps retain carbon in the soil. And therefore, on so-called regenerative farms, where the cows are rotated lovingly from paddock to paddock, their magical manure fertilizes the land in just the perfect proportions to create healthy soil. Now, I've yet to hear the explanation for why cow manure is more magical than the manure of wolves or foxes or deer or elk or bears or rabbits, so I think we could disregard this foolishness. Humans would be wise to follow the lead of nature. And nature didn't create regenerative farms, it created forests and woodlands and grassy plains inhabited by more than cows. In fact, cows themselves were not created by nature. Humans bred them from oxen. Even on regenerative farms, the foliage that grows naturally has to be cut to give the cows grazing room. Wolves and other natural predators have to be killed, and fences have to be erected. There will be less biodiversity on a regenerative farm than on land that's rewilded. And the soil will retain more carbon on land that's rewilded. Now that we understand that animal foods are profoundly unhealthy, it becomes that much more indefensible to destroy the planet so that humans can eat animals. Once you understand that there's no health reason to eat meat, that we're not designed to eat meat, that eating meat is making us fat and sick, then all the horrors of animal agriculture begin to look like pure insanity. And nothing is more important to our health than the ability to breathe. The last 7 years have been the 7 warmest years on record. 2021 was also the 7th consecutive year when the global temperature has been more than 1 degree Celsius above pre-industrial levels, edging closer to the limit laid out in the 2015 Paris Agreement on climate change. Exactly how often do we have to be surprised by the headlines? In 2019, it was reported that oceans were heating 40% faster than previous estimates. And now, 5 years later, they are warming, quote, far exceeding anything seen in the past 40 years. If there was ever a time to follow the precautionary principle, this is it. Here's the precautionary principle. Where there are threats of serious or irreversible damage, lack of full scientific certainty shall not be used as a reason for postponing cost-effective measures to prevent environmental degradation. Now, you can't really say that we're not 100% sure about whether global warming is occurring when the oceans are heating up faster than even concerned climatologists had predicted. You can't say, let's take a slow, measured approach to global warming. Let's take this one step at a time, because we have no time. Clearly, we have to do everything we can possibly do as quickly as we can do it to restore a breathable planet. Again, lack of full scientific certainty shall not be used as a reason for postponing cost-effective measures to prevent environmental degradation. A steady and remarkable rise in average global ocean temperatures this year is now outpacing anything seen in 4 decades of satellite observations, causing many scientists to suddenly blare alarm over the risks and realities of climate change. But even those typically aligned on climate science can't agree on what exactly triggered such rapid warming and how alarmed they should be. Some speculated that a drop in pollution allowed more sunlight to reach the oceans, but other explanations suggested a weakening of Atlantic winds carrying sun-blocking sand plumes from the Sahara, that was a main culprit. So when you're dealing with a system involving currents, winds, volcanoes, ice covers, sand plumes, cloud formation, humidity, forest fires, we have to have the humility to acknowledge that it's a system that we can't predict with precision. Again, lack of full scientific certainty shall not be used as a reason for postponing cost-effective measures to prevent environmental degradation in the history of environmental policy. Has there ever been a more cost-effective measure than eating beans instead of beef? Without federal subsidies, beef would cost 20 times more than beans, and we'll save on so many health costs. If we must do everything we could possibly do as soon as we can possibly do it to ensure a breathable planet, and we can't predict how quickly we will pass climate tipping points if we don't, then the first step we must take is obvious. This is a no-brainer. If we want to breathe, our civilization must stop grazing animals, and we must stop eating them, and we must stop industrial fishing. Now, climate change is caused by the burning of fossil fuels, right? Well, in part. It's a big factor, all right. The burning of fossil fuels is indeed the second leading cause of climate change. But the leading cause is animal agriculture, and that's because of carbon opportunity cost. 37% of the world's non-ice land surface is grazed. If even less than half is restored to forests, we can sequester enough carbon dioxide to return us to pre-industrial revolution levels of atmospheric CO2. The signature greenhouse gases of animal agriculture, methane and nitrous oxide, are far more powerful greenhouse gases than carbon dioxide. Methane is 120 times as powerful. Nitrous oxide is 300 times as powerful. So why isn't animal agriculture the first thing people talk about when they talk about climate change instead of the last? Well, there's the visual bias. You could see smokestacks from energy plants and manufacturing plants belching carbon dioxide and other pollutants into the air. You can't see the methane and carbon dioxide being produced by 1.5 billion cattle on the planet. And then let's add in the sheep and the goats and the manure from 25 billion farmed animals, which also produces methane and nitrous oxide. Most of us don't see the lagoons of manure that are fouling our landscape. We also don't see the forests that are no longer there, that have been cut down or burned to make room for cows, and the land that has been gradually grazed into desert. In the year 2021, Dr. Sailesh Rao published in the peer-reviewed Journal of Ecological Society a paper demonstrating that animal agriculture is responsible for at least 87% of greenhouse gases. He arrived at this figure by estimating that at least 41% of the grazing land could be restored to forest, and by estimating the carbon capture of the soil in those forests, as well as the above-ground vegetation. And this estimate did not include the effects of animal respiration from 25 billion farmed animals, pasture maintenance fires, bottom trawling of the oceans, and decreased sequestration from diminished phytoplankton populations due to industrial fishing and diminished sea forests. Now, if you include these factors, some of which are hard to measure, you find yourself estimating that animal agriculture is responsible for well above 100% of greenhouse gases. That is well above the amount of greenhouse gases that we're adding to the atmosphere annually. In other words, if we ended animal agriculture and rewilded the land dedicated to it, the planet would begin to cool. So when we argue for the vegan diet, we shouldn't accept the UN figure that animal agriculture is responsible for 14.5% of greenhouse gases, more than all forms of transportation. That downplays the reality many-fold. The UN is not factoring in carbon opportunity costs because it's just assuming that 37% of the land surface of the Earth must be grazed, and another 6% must be used to grow feed for animals. They're not factoring in the damage to the oceans because they're just assuming that industrial fishing must happen. They're not factoring in animal respiration because they just assume that we must have 25 billion farmed animals. So you don't have to be a climatologist to know that all their estimates are hogwash. The red dots represent, in this NASA satellite map, the red dots represent the pasture maintenance fires set on just one day around the world. These fires are set to burn all vegetation that cows don't eat. Nobody is quantifying how much carbon is being released into the atmosphere from these fires. And the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is not factoring in how much vegetation and forest are lost to create grazing land. Look at the deserts. From the Sahara in northern Africa to the deserts of the Middle East, to the Thar Desert in northern India, to the Gobi Desert. It's a 6,000-mile stretch of mostly desert. And we know that this was all forested or was savanna in the past. The Sahara was forested less than 10,000 years ago. So what happened less than 10,000 years ago? Well, it just so happens that that's when agriculture began, and humans began cutting down trees and grazing goats and cattle on the land, exacerbating other factors. Humans are clearing the Amazon now for cattle grazing, and one day soon there'll be a big patch of brown in South America called the Amazonian Desert. Animal agriculture and industrial fishing are the leading causes of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, deforestation and desertification, ocean dead zones, biodiversity loss, water scarcity, and pandemics. Is this worth all that damage for a burger? The bun is made from wheat. You don't need animal agriculture for the bun. You don't need it for the lettuce or the pickle or the tomato or the mustard. All you have to do is replace the beef patty with a portobello mushroom or a bean burger or soy burger or lentil burger or any kind of veggie burger. It won't taste so fatty. In fact, it'll taste better, and your taste buds will quickly learn to appreciate not eating so much fat, and it'll be far healthier. So let's compare social goods. The burning of fossil fuels provides transportation, heating, energy generation, the warming of homes, fuel for cooking, virtually all manufactured goods. That's a lot of social goods. I'm not an apologist for the fossil fuel industry, but you've got to admit that we've all benefited in many ways from the burning of fossil fuels. Eating animals provides obesity, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, food poisoning, pandemics, noxious lagoons of manure, prolific waste of water and grain, and less food. We call people who raise animals for food farmers, but remember, they're actually reducing our supply of food when they feed grain and other food to the animals. So if you define a farmer as a person who grows food, they're not really farmers, are they? They're anti-farmers. In order to heal, we have to leave our wounds alone. How do we heal this planet? A doctor never dresses and bandages a wound and says, go home and scratch it every day. No, they say, leave it alone and it will heal. We are self-healing mechanisms. So is the earth. In order to heal the earth, we need to leave as much of it alone as we can. If we stop eating animals, we could leave more than 80% of the earth alone to heal. 70% of it is the oceans. We need to end industrial fishing. We also need to protect the oceans from plastics and other pollutants, but industrial fishing is what's harming the oceans far more than anything else. So we begin by protecting the oceans. If we stop eating and exploiting animals, we can add 43% of the non-ice land surface of the earth that we can free up for rewilding, which is enough carbon capture to return us to pre-industrial age levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So once you win the health argument, and once you make the case that animal agriculture is the leading cause of climate change, the meat defenders have struck out. To summarize my advice on how to win the debate, first, be prepared for the health debate. 2, don't fall into the trap of debating health studies. Instead, analyze diet, review the macronutrients, ask where the advantage to meat could possibly lie. 3, don't fall into the trap of labeling some foods as proteins and some food as carbohydrates, or allow the meat defender to do that. 4, use logic instead of being trapped by misinformation. If humans were designed to eat meat, why are we the only mammal to experience atherosclerosis? Why do we line up with all the other herbivores in every respect of anatomy and function? Why do we have no claws and such unimpressive teeth that we call canines? Why do we have no desire to bite into the living flesh of animals? Why does only the low-fat vegan diet reverse heart disease? Why would we want to cycle our nutrients through animals instead of getting them directly through plants? What is there in meat that could possibly be good for you and worth destroying the planet for? The answer, of course, is nothing. Now, repeatedly through this talk, I've used the phrase, it just so happens that. Let me read back some instances from this presentation when I use that phrase. It just so happens that dietary fiber is crucial to creating metabolites that improve our health and even metabolites that can improve our mood. It just so happens that metabolites from meat consumption are dangerous. It just so happens that we're the only species to get atherosclerosis. It just so happens that when you feed cholesterol to omnivores and carnivores, such as dogs and cats, atherosclerosis never develops. Dr. Campbell's work proved that it just so happens that while animal protein brought on cancer, plant protein did not. It just so happens that diets with large amounts of saturated fat, animal products, and refined carbohydrate may induce endotoxemia more markedly than diets containing fiber-rich plant foods. The Sahara was forested less than 10,000 years ago. So what happened less than 10,000 years ago? It just so happens that's when agriculture began and humans began cutting down trees and grazing goats and cattle on the land. Well, of course, it doesn't just so happens because we humans are designed to eat plants. Every time we make the foolish mistake of eating animals, we screw up our health and the world. These are my latest books. You could contact me through glenmerzer.com, and please subscribe to the Glen Merzer Show on YouTube. And I will now stop the share.
Great. Thank you so much, Glenn. That was a great presentation. So, excuse me. Now we're going to begin our Q&A session. I just want to let everybody know that your book is also available on our website, therealtruthabout.health.com. And then was that everything? Is that what you just showed? Was that how to contact you? The best way to get
through glenmerzer.com is easy.
Okay. All right, great. So there's our bookstore right there, and you can get Glenn's books on the realtruthabout.health.com bookstore. So we're going to begin our Q&A, and if anyone would like to ask a question, they can put their hands up in Zoom. So first, let me ask you you just did this presentation on how to argue with a meat eater. Have you used it to argue with a meat eater, and has it persuaded them?
Well, I have persuaded some people. I find that it depends so much on the personality of the person you're talking to. I have a new young friend, he's in his 30s, who's an environmentalist. And I said to him, you can't really be an environmentalist and eat meat. You should go vegan. His cholesterol was high. And he said, okay. And he started the next day. That was a year and a half ago. And he's been vegan ever since. I have other people who I've persuaded, but it's been slow. They start by cutting down on meat, and then slowly they realize they have to get rid of dairy, and they take their time. I like to think that my books have created a number of vegans. I've come across people who've written that in their reviews of my books or have contacted me. Yes, I use this technique. I believe that it's most important to at least be able to answer the health arguments. Maybe with some people it's more important to them to talk about the environment or the animal cruelty. But if you're not able to make the case on health, then you could lose the debate because people will just throw studies at you and confuse you.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And for people who want to arm themselves to go out and talk to meat eaters, if you had to boil it down to just one or two really basic arguments, because you just gave an hour and almost an hour and a half presentation on this. Obviously, people aren't going to be able to do as good of a job as you've done, and they probably won't come prepared with a PowerPoint. What would be one or two items that you think are most effective in the discussion when you're trying to, I'll say, enlighten as opposed to argue with a meat eater?
Well, first, all the studies on comparing mammalian herbivores with mammalian omnivores and mammalian carnivores. And Dr. Milton Mills has videos on this that you could find online. It just becomes clear that everything about our biology, about our anatomy, was not created to eat meat. It was created to eat plants. You see the gape of a lion or a tiger when it sees its prey. We can't do that. And we have no instinct to do that, no desire to do that. We don't have claws. We have weak hydrochloric acid in our stomachs. We have long intestines. So if you review all the facets of anatomy, you find that humans are just natural herbivores. So I think that's a very strong argument. I think the fact that we're the only species to get atherosclerosis is a powerful argument. I think the fact that so many people, even children, will just naturally be repelled by the idea of eating meat. It isn't something that humans want to do. So the only reason it happens, for the most part, is that we just buy slabs of meat, packaged meat in grocery stores, and we don't look at how it happens. If we looked at how it happens, we wouldn't want to do it.
Great. So in your book, Food is Climate, which directly responds to climate change solutions from Al Gore, Bill Gates, Paul Hawken. Tell me what's wrong with what are their solutions? What's wrong with their solutions? What are your solutions, and how are they better?
Well, Bill Gates, in his book on climate, begins by proposing that what we have to do is absolutely get our fossil fuel use down to zero. Now, I'm betting that he goes on a lot of private planes. She uses burns an extraordinary amount of fuel. So how does he justify that? He probably then, gives a few $1 million to plant trees somewhere, and it's, he tries to atone for his sins. But there is no clear path to zero fossil fuel use in the near future. It's a fantasy. I'm not an apologist again for the fossil fuel industry, but realistically, we're not going to have all electric trucks on the road anytime soon, and we're not going to generate 100% of our energy from clean fuel anytime soon. We should absolutely try to reduce our use of fossil fuels as much as we can, as fast as we can. But we're not going to get to zero anytime in our lifetimes. So Bill Gates seems to feel that the solution that I propose and others propose of a vegan transformation of the world, he wrote that that's not realistic. And why did he feel that that's not realistic? He wrote because of our human traditions, like having turkey on Thanksgiving. So for his solution of getting to zero fossil fuels, he's got to make airplanes run on pixie dust. And he thinks it's unrealistic to stop having turkey at Thanksgiving. I think it's perfectly realistic to not have turkey on Thanksgiving. Gather with your friends and family, feel gratitude, all the wonderful things about the Thanksgiving holiday, and just do it without killing the turkey. Is that so hard? So what he thinks is impossible, I think is easy. And what he claims is possible, I think is impossible, getting to zero fossil fuels. Now, Paul Hawken, I think, is a more thoughtful guy, and he has a whole book on different solutions to the climate crisis, and he makes a wonderful contribution in describing them and promoting them. And he acknowledges the importance of diet, but again, he refuses to just hop on board and say we should all stop eating animals. Instead, he talks a little bit about regenerative agriculture and tries to greenwash regenerative agriculture. You can have regenerative vegan agriculture, but not with cows. And then Al Gore, well, Al Gore just refuses to talk about animal agriculture. It's like it embarrasses him. And all he talks about is fossil fuel burning. And in doing so, he's talking about a very small percentage of the problem.
Okay. And with regard to Al Gore, I thought he had gone vegan at one point. Is that not true?
I believe he is vegan, and he's very shy about it. And he doesn't want to suggest that anybody else go vegan. And he raises some animals, I think, on one of his farms. I think he tries to do it regeneratively. I've heard him wax poetic about the wonders of the magical cow manure. He's just, look, he started as a politician, and I think maybe he just can't break that instinct for not wanting to offend people and say something that the public might find extreme. I don't think he's ever running for president again, but if he did, he probably wouldn't want to be considered the vegan candidate. So he just refuses to acknowledge the self-evident truth that it would be much better for the planet if people would stop foolishly eating meat and making themselves sick.
Great. So how do you address criticisms from proponents of sustainable meat and dairy farming who argue that these practices can be part of the climate solution?
Well, they're not.
Right.
As I said in my presentation, grass-fed beef grass-fed cows are worse for the planet than the CAFO cows. Now, I know that seems strange when you think about all the terrible, terrible horrors of CAFOs. I mean, they're an environmental nightmare. They like to call them lagoons, these cesspools of pig manure and cow manure. And I just saw a very good documentary called The Smell of Money, in which, it tells the story about how in North Carolina, they spray the pig manure on human beings, on the neighbors who live there. Often they're poorer African-American people, and they get the brunt of this horrible industry. So CAFOs are nightmares. But from the point of view of the planet and from an understanding of how much meat people eat, if people are going to eat meat, understand this, there is no alternative to CAFOs. We have, 340 million Americans eating meat 3 times a day? You can't raise that much meat on happy farms with a few pigs running around, a few cows ambling through the grass. You can't do it. You need the CAFOs if people are going to eat meat. And the grass-fed beef live longer, exercise more, and take longer to reach their finishing weight, so they're belching more methane. It's not a question of trying to do sustainable animal agriculture. That's a contradiction in terms. There is no sustainable animal agriculture. It's all a threat to the planet.
Great. I'm going to go to our audience for one of the questions. JW, please state where you're from and ask your question.
Hi, I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. So I'm sorry, when you posted your contact information, I missed it, and I'm wondering if I might get it, and wondering if you speak for other groups.
Yes, I do. Thank you. And it's just myname.com, Glen Merzer, GlenMerzer.com.
Okay.
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. It was a fantastic presentation. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you, JW.
John beat me to it. All right, great. So, see here. And okay, so can you discuss a study that supports your thesis of that you present in Food is Climate and its implications for the global dietary guidelines?
Well, Dr. Silas Rao's study, in which he made the assumption that 41% of the grazing land could be restored to forest. So he did the math on how much more carbon dioxide would be sequestered if 41% of the grazing land on Earth was restored to forest, and how much more carbon would be stored in the soil. And it turned out to be enough to cool the planet effectively, to restore us to pre-industrial levels, pre-industrial age levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So he calculated that, as I said, at least 87% of greenhouse gases coming from animal agriculture. There was a study, I think, by Ethan Brown that came, I think, to about 65%, something like that. But the reality is, even Silas's study, as I pointed out, didn't include animal respiration. That's carbon dioxide from 25 billion farmed animals. It didn't include bottom trawling of the ocean. Now, I'm not saying this as criticism of Silas's study. How are you going to measure how much carbon is kicked up by the bottom trawling of the ocean? You know, how are you going to measure how much industrial fishing is diminishing the phytoplankton populations that also sequester carbon dioxide and exhale oxygen? So these things are not so easily measurable. And even the UN's IPCC recently revised their own calculation of how much carbon is stored in the soil versus the trees. And they said, oh, there's even more in the soil. So Silas then redid his calculation, and suddenly 87% of greenhouse gases became over 100%. So my point is, we should approach this with a degree of humility. We don't know exactly when we're going to reach a tipping point, and a climate tipping point, and we can't know exactly how much carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases are coming from each individual source. So what we should do, what we must do, is say, we must do everything we can. What can we do? Well, yeah, we can drive less. We can drive electric vehicles. Not that that's totally carbon free. We can, maybe cook on an electric stove instead of a gas stove. We can try not to overdo the heating and cooling of our homes. Use heat pumps. Yeah, we could do all those things, but we'll do 1,000 times more if we just stop eating animal foods. If we reduce the demand for animal foods to zero, then that industry will end. So that's the most important thing we can do.
So how do you respond to recent studies suggesting that technological innovations in agriculture can mitigate the climate impacts without drastic changes to the diet?
Well, again, it's a con job. I've seen that Cargill, the giant agricultural business, is now experimenting with putting masks on cows. So the masks on the cows are supposed to capture the methane. Well, we could have masked cows, or we could just do the smart thing and stop eating the burgers that are killing us. I don't see why we need to stretch for one preposterous technological solution after another in order to do something that isn't worth doing in the first place. So since we shouldn't be eating cows, I'm not optimistic about the masked cows.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn it over to the audience once again and ask Alejandro. Please state where you're from and what's your question. Alejandro?
Hi. Hi. Thank you, Glenn, for your presentation. My
Thank
name's
you.
Alex, and I appreciate your angle, like, of all your arguments and your clear logic. It's like you make it like really easy to explain, and I think, like, for me, as a health and life coach, it's a lot easier to explain it to people, to at least present it in a form that's very logical and easy to understand. My question is, are you familiar with the work of Dr. Greg Braden?
Greg?
Greg Braden?
No.
No. He's a scientist that has talked about ice cores and the relationship to the temperature change on the planet.
Mhm.
And he was basically, the gist of what he was saying was that he says that the type of climate activity that we're experiencing now was already occurring before humans existed. I just thought maybe, what was your opinion on that?
Well, again, I think we have to approach the climate crisis with humility. And since we can't know exactly when we're going to hit a tipping point, we shouldn't, we shouldn't try to, that sounds like someone trying to say, don't worry, it's not so bad. It's been this way before.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Look, it's hard to ignore the evidence in front of your eyes. We've had the
Yeah.
worst storms, the worst wildfires. We have these 100-year storms happening every year in different parts of the country, worst droughts, the wildfires in Europe and in Australia, and what happened in Hawaii and so forth. To say, well, maybe there isn't a problem. Maybe it was always this way. I don't buy that. And we know how we can measure the parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It keeps going up every year. So the approach should be the precautionary principle. Do everything we can and do the most cost-effective thing we can. And the simplest and most cost-effective thing we could do is to get healthy by eating plants instead of foolishly eat animals.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. It's like we have to do our part, right? We have to do what we can. And obviously yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Great. Thanks,
Thank you.
Alejandro. Okay, so what role does deforestation from animal agriculture play in climate change, and how can we change how can changing our diet reverse that?
Well, deforestation is, arguably the single leading cause of climate change. It's a nightmare for climate change. First, you lose the trees, which sequester carbon dioxide. Second, you degrade the soil, which holds carbon in it. Third, the burning of the trees releases carbon into the atmosphere. And then it obviously creates a loss of biodiversity. And again, let's be humble. Nature was created over millions of years. And we can't know when we destroy the habitats of different animals how many different things we're affecting, including hurting ourselves. So deforestation is the enemy. And to do that, to chop back the Amazon for the purpose of growing soybeans and hamburgers, and the soybeans get fed to the cows, to chop back the Amazon in order to give ourselves heart attacks is the single stupidest thing humanity has ever done. So, deforestation is caused primarily by animal agriculture, and it's the first thing we have to stop.
Okay, same question for ocean acidification. Obviously, that's a major concern. How does shifting our diet to a plant-exclusive diet help alleviate this problem?
Well, ocean acidification is caused by too much carbon and also by the fertilizer runoff into the rivers and streams and oceans. And we use the fertilizer to grow grains that we then feed to the animals. So again, we have to stop the overuse of fertilizers, and we have to stop wasting land in order to grow grain to transport to animals, to then slaughter the animals and eat the animals. It's just not food. It's not human food. So everything that we do to perpetuate the foolishness of eating animals is destroying the planet, and it's destroying the oceans.
Sorry about that.
Michael?
I accidentally muted myself there.
Okay.
How does animal agriculture contribute to biodiversity loss, and what are the mechanisms by which a plant-based diet could mitigate this?
Well, again, the deforestation that is the prerequisite for animal agriculture means that you're chopping down the habitat of animals. And the spraying of the grain crops, with pesticides isn't good for the wildlife and for the birds and so forth. So, we are, and then the other thing they do, of course, is they go out and kill, wolves and carnivores that are going to threaten the cattle, and they fence it off. So in all kinds of ways, animal agriculture becomes the leading cause of biodiversity loss. And of course, in the oceans, and let's refer to fishing as animal agriculture, where we are overfishing and we are bottom trawling the ocean, and we are, the movie Seaspiracy showed something that I found remarkably shocking. In their, mile-long nets, they get all this bycatch. They're trying to get tuna, and they get dolphins. And then what they do when they capture the dolphins, you would think they would just say, well, people don't eat dolphins, so they throw them back in the ocean. But they don't do that. They slit their throats, they kill them, and then they throw them back in the ocean. Now, why would they do such a cruel thing? And they do that because the dolphins are competing with them for the tuna. You see, dolphins are the enemy, competing with the fishermen for the tuna. So they just kill the dolphins and then throw them back in the ocean. So these are all kinds of ways in which eating animals and having animal agriculture creates a loss of biodiversity.
So as you may be aware, there are a bunch of strikes going on, or protests, I should say, going on with farmers in Europe. They're basically some of the countries in Europe are saying that the farmers are contributing to climate change, and they're taking measures to make it harder for them to farm. So there's protests going on there. I've also recently seen some stuff going around saying that even like home gardens are bad for the environment. Have you seen any of that? Are you aware of the stuff going on in Europe with the protests?
I'm not really on top of all that, no. And so I can't comment intelligently on it, but I can't imagine why gardens are bad for the environment unless you're using toxic substances in your garden.
Is there anything wrong with, in your mind, with regard to climate change for the farmers, like just general farming, take out animal agriculture, but actual farming, is that, in comparison to the animal agriculture, is that okay, or is that detrimental?
Well, we need farms. We need people to be growing plant foods. Now, there's, some people do it organically. Some people do it veganically. So the higher you could go on that scale, the better. And if you're, growing strawberries and you're spraying them with pesticides, and you're spraying the farm workers who are working there, I don't approve of that. So, but obviously we need to grow food.
Okay, I'm going to throw it out to the audience once more. Stephen Vazella, please state where you're from and ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm from Buffalo, New York. Just a great presentation. Thanks.
Thank you.
Recently, I watched a PBS special that showed in, geologically ancient times, the Earth is frozen and then gotten hot and then frozen. So, but that's way before humans, and that's got nothing to do with what we're doing here now. So, I just want to say you had a great presentation. I agree with everything
Thank
you
you.
said.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
And
for
when
that.
you go back, all those millions of years, you find that there's a relationship between when the planet was more forested and the climate. So the emphasis now on making the planet more forested will cool the planet. That pattern has been discovered historically.
Great. So, given the urgent tone of food is climate, what immediate actions do you recommend individuals to take to contribute to climate change mitigation?
Well, obviously, first go vegan and try to get everyone else to go vegan. We have to try to have a vegan transformation of the world. And politically, there's something that's very, very difficult to do, and I don't know if we'll see it in our lifetime, but I would like the government to stop subsidizing animal agriculture. I don't mind if they were to subsidize, the organic growing of fruits and vegetables, but they should get out of the business of subsidizing animal agriculture. So that would be the political goal.
All right, great. So give me 1 second here. And start with that. So in the context of food security, how does a plant-exclusive diet offer solutions for food and water shortages exacerbated by climate change?
Well, roughly half the water we're using in this country is going to animal agriculture. So it takes a tremendous amount of water to create a burger, could you repeat the question? There was water and what else?
So it was basically it was in the context of food security. So
Food security. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, then the other thing is, you take 10 to 25 pounds of grain to make 1 pound of chicken or beef, so it's, as I said, that's not really farming when you're creating less food. So we would have more food security, obviously, if we didn't feed our food to animals. So it's the only path to food security.
So how do you address the argument that high yield farming methods, which include GMOs, I saw someone comment something about like how necessary it is to spray, or I guess everything. So including GMOs, spraying, and all the modern agriculture techniques are necessary to feed the global population sustainably.
Well, high yield farming probably played a part in preventing mass famines over the last 30 years. But the human population continues to grow. I wish it would stabilize. And the best strategy going forward is not to continue to try to do this intensive agriculture, because that's often destructive to the land. Instead, the best path going forward is to stop wasting our grain by feeding it to animals and then eating the animals. So, the intensive agriculture that has come in the last, I guess, 40 or 50 years has served its purpose, I guess, in preventing famine. But there's a better strategy going forward.
All right, so we've got a few minutes left. So in that time, could you explain the connection between diet, land use, and the potential spread of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, as discussed in your book?
Well, the problem with antibiotics is not so much that humans are overusing them, although we are, but that animal agriculture is overusing. You know, something like 90% of antibiotic use is in animal agriculture. So they use it both because you put animals in an unnatural situation. You put 30,000 chickens in a warehouse. You know, you put hundreds of thousands of pigs in a warehouse. They're all on top of each other. It creates disease. So they inject these animals with antibiotics, and also the antibiotics apparently help them grow faster so that they can be slaughtered sooner. So it's the prolific use of antibiotics that's causing antibiotic resistance and threatening to breed superbugs. So again, do we really want all these harms just to have a product that isn't natural for us to eat and kills us? You know, it's just insane. So the path to having antibiotics in the future to help our hospitals and our doctors and ourselves as patients, the path to having a slate of antibiotics that work is to stop overusing them, stop using them at all for animal agriculture.
Great. We've got 1 minute left. So just a quick question. You mentioned with regard to the government that, you know, you would love to see them stop subsidizing animal agriculture. What other specific policy do you think could be done at the governmental level that you believe would be significantly impactful regarding climate change?
Well, Mayor Adams of New York has made plant foods the default option in hospitals. So that's a good way to start. I would like to see plant foods the default option in schools and hospitals and the armed services and anywhere that the government has an influence on where food is served. So, you know, stop buying cheese, you know, stop having the government support the dairy industry by buying butter and cheese and put, you know, serving milk in schools. Just make plant foods the default option. And if, you know, if people want to, if kids want to ask for non-plant foods, well, I don't think they should be made available at all, but at least make them ask for it.
Right.
Don't make it the default.
Great. And with that, Glenn, that concludes our presentation and our time together. So so thank you very much. It was extremely informative, and I specifically love the atherosclerotic issue. I'm going to be using that one myself. So John, if you can unmute the audience so that they can say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alcohol is really helpful.
Thank you.
To tracking
Thank
essential
you.
essential oils and materials.